You have always pictured what $2 million looks like without ever seeing it up close. Not from your own life, but from everyone else's. Feed the boat, the kitchen renovation, the trip nobody needed a reason for. You built the picture out of borrowed evidence, and you always assumed the moment it finally happened to you would feel enormous. This afternoon, you find out whether that is true. You are standing in your kitchen in a small rental outside Sacramento with a mug of coffee going cold in your hand when you open the banking app out of pure habit. The number at the top reads $2,104. You read it twice. You check the account name at the top just to be sure you have not somehow opened a stranger's login by mistake. You have not. It is yours. Vanguard. Retirement and brokerage combined. 7 figures times 2. And the only sound in the room is the refrigerator humming and your dog scratching at the back door to be let outside. Your partner is on a work call in the next room, completely unaware that something just quietly tipped over. Most people spend their entire working lives circling this number and never actually touch it. You could interrupt the call and tell her. You do not. There is nothing you could say right now that would not sound strange said out loud on a random Tuesday afternoon. Instead, you open your phone to the usual scroll, and there is Marcus from your old warehouse job standing beside a brand new Range Rover, the fully loaded model that runs close to $104,000 with every option checked. The caption says, "Treated myself finally 47 comments already." You used to think a moment like that was the proof. The instant you would know you had actually made it. A vehicle sitting in a driveway that strangers could look at and understand instantly. You glance back at your own number. It is not parked anywhere. It cannot be photographed, leaning against anything. It is sitting inside index funds and a retirement account quietly compounding the way it always has, which is invisibly. For a second, the two things sit side by side in your mind, his truck, your number, and you feel something close to letdown, like you were supposed to feel different than this by now. Then you do the thing that has always steadied you, which is run the actual math. The average household in this country spends somewhere around $82,000 a year to simply exist, rent, food, insurance, gas, all of it. You have read that figure so many times it lives permanently in your head. At a realistic long-term withdrawal rate, your account sitting untouched would throw off close to $85,000 this year without you doing anything at all. Not quite freedom. Close enough that the idea no longer feels ridiculous. That is the part that actually lands not the number itself, but the fact that it now roughly matches the cost of simply being alive. You have spent years thinking of money as something you had to chase down. This is the first afternoon it occurs to you that it might start chasing you instead. You set the phone on the counter face down. You do not feel like someone in a luxury car advertisement. You feel like someone who still has a client call at 3. Same as yesterday, same as tomorrow. The space between the number on the screen and the life it has not changed yet sits in your chest unresolved. You think back to how you actually arrived here, not this afternoon the decade before it. The part nobody ever photographs. The long, quiet climb toward your first million. You were 23 the first time you set up an automatic transfer 9 years before that Range Rover post. Back when $40 felt like real money to give away. You were stacking pallets at a regional distribution center outside Fresno, folding down cardboard on your break. On your lunch hour, you opened an app you barely understood and moved $40 into a retirement account you had heard about from a coworker named Denise who had been there for 15 years and said the same thing every single time money came up. Start small, just start. So you started. The yearly limit on that account back then was a fraction of what it is today. This year, you could contribute up to $8,000 if you wanted to max it out more than you would have earned in 4 months at your old hourly wage. You were not maxing anything. You were simply never stopping. Your coworker Trent sat across from you most shifts, showing you concert tickets and a new gaming setup he had financed on a card he had not paid off yet. He had a phrase he repeated constantly. Money is meant to be spent while you are young. He upgraded his setup twice that year. You upgraded nothing. You watched his stories from festivals while eating the same bowl of rice and beans you made every night in your studio apartment, and some nights that genuinely felt like losing. Then came the spring, everyone. Your age still talks about the one where the market dropped for nearly a month straight without pausing. You had maybe $7,000 invested, by then barely anything, and you still refreshed the app every hour, like watching it would somehow change the outcome. You watched $400 evaporate and felt it the same way you would feel a bounced rent check. Nobody had warned you that losing money you never intended to spend could still make your hands shake. You did not sell. You could not fully explain why, even to yourself. You were 25 with no real strategy. You simply stopped opening the app for 9 days because looking at it made you nauseous. When you finally checked again, most of it had already returned. That was the first time you learned the actual lesson instead of just hearing someone else say it. The account only loses money for real on the day you touch it. By 27, you had a proper job, a supply chain analyst position at a regional logistics firm, and a company retirement match you finally understood how to use. The yearly contribution ceiling kept rising every single year, and you never came close to hitting it. But every raise you got a little more went into the account instead of into a nicer car or a bigger apartment. Trent, as far as you know, was still leasing a new car every 2 years and still going to every festival. You were not jealous anymore by then. You simply noticed you had stopped needing to be. None of that ever got filmed. There is no photo of a random Wednesday in your late 20s when you bumped your contribution rate up by 2%. There is no caption for 9 days of refusing to check an app. It was only years stacking quietly on top of each other while your life looked exactly the same from the outside the whole time. Then one email showed up making it official. You had crossed into a category the government has a name for. The message arrives on an ordinary Monday subject line, so plain you nearly scroll past it. Update to your account documentation. You are at your kitchen table finishing breakfast before work. You open it because you open every message from your brokerage, a habit built over 9 years of checking. It takes 2 full reads before it makes sense. Because your net worth, not counting your primary residence since you rent, now sits above $2 million, you meet the federal definition of an accredited investor. The letter does not explain what this actually changes about your daily life. It simply states it as a fact that was always going to arrive on its own schedule, and today happened to be the day. You sit there for a minute, spoon halfway to your mouth. You do not feel accredited. You feel like someone who is going to be 4 minutes late for a client call, same as most Mondays. But somewhere in a regulatory filing system, you have officially been reclassified. The threshold has not moved in decades. Back when it was written, this amount of money meant something almost unimaginable. It is still treated that way on paper, even though today it buys a comfortable house in a mid-sized city and nothing more extravagant than that. Right now, something close to 1 in 8 American households clears this exact line more than at any point before, mostly because the number itself never adjusted while everything around it quietly got more expensive. You think about your neighbor Priya, who works in private banking downtown, and mentioned this exact phrase to you once at a block party last summer, half joking like it only happened to other people. You will hit it sooner than you think she had said refilling her cup. You had laughed it off then. You were nearly 400,000 away at the time. You do not laugh it off this morning. What the letter actually opens up, you discover scrolling the linked page over a second cup of coffee is access. Private placements. Real estate partnerships built specifically for people who cross this exact line. Investments that were never legally allowed to be marketed to you before this morning. Priya had once mentioned a development. Her firm structures something along a stretch of coastline near Sarasota. Units starting at $2.1 million. The kind of listing that used to appear in your feed as pure fantasy and technically now sits inside a category you could actually enter if you chose to. You do not choose to. Not yet. But you notice the distance between could not and choosing not to for the first time, and it sits differently in your chest than the number itself ever has. You finish your breakfast. You rinse the same chipped bowl you have had since your first apartment, and you get dressed for a job that has no idea any of this happened. On the drive-in, you keep circling back to how quiet the whole thing was. No call, no handshake, just an email with a forgettable subject line confirming that part of your life had permanently shifted while you were asleep. You do not know yet how quickly that quiet can turn into something else. You are about to find out. 3 weeks after the letter, you are standing in a grocery store parking lot near your house bag, still in the cart when your phone lights up with something you do not want to read. 14%. That is what the market has done in 16 days. A surprise inflation report rattled everything, and the index kept sliding while you were at your desk not watching. 14% sounds almost mild, said out loud. On your account, it translates to nearly $290,000 gone on paper since the letter arrived. You do the subtraction twice, like the app might correct itself the second time. Your thumb finds the sell button before you consciously decide to move it there, the same reflex that used to send your hand toward your phone before you even knew you wanted to check it. Sell everything, lock in whatever is left, stop the number from shrinking further. Something behind your ribs is insisting this is different now. It is not $40 from a warehouse paycheck anymore. It is this house and the next 15 years and every single automatic transfer you ever set up, and it is currently draining out of your life at a speed you cannot control. You remember reading once that losing money registers roughly twice as painfully as gaining the same amount feels good. You did not believe it back then. You believe it completely now, standing beside a cart of groceries, slowly warming in the sun, grieving money you never actually spent. Then your phone buzzes again. A message from someone named Foster Wren, senior portfolio strategist, profile photo in a charcoal blazer, an expensive watch, just visible at the edge of the frame. Notice the volatility today. Clients at your level are moving into a managed protection sleeve. Happy to walk you through it before markets close. 1.2% of assets annually, he writes, for real peace of mind. You almost say yes. Your hands are still slightly unsteady, and the offer sounds like someone finally taking the wheel from you. But some old habit, the same one that kept you off the app for 9 days years ago, makes you run the math before you do anything else. 1.2% a year on $2 million compounded across 3 decades against what a simple index fund left alone would likely return. You had actually calculated this exact scenario months earlier out of idle curiosity, and it comes back to you now standing in the parking lot. Something close to $3.6 million lost to that single fee over time for a service that historically fails to even outperform the very market it claims to be protecting you from. You set the phone face down in the passenger seat. You think back to a spring years earlier when your $7,000 account, your entire net worth at the time, dropped below $5,000 within a few weeks. You did not sell then, either mostly because you were too broke and too busy to figure out how, and it recovered fully by that summer. You barely noticed when it did because you had stopped checking by then. You start the car instead of reopening the app. The groceries are still faintly warm in the back seat. You never reply to Foster. You do not sell anything. You simply drive home the longer way past the community pool you keep meaning to use, past the gym you keep meaning to join, feeling the particular stillness that follows almost doing something you cannot take back. By the time you are putting groceries away, the shaking has mostly stopped. What remains is something steadier, something you do not quite have a word for yet, but you are going to need one soon, because the way this game gets played from here is about to change completely. Tax season finds you sitting across from an accountant named Priya Osei in a small office above a bakery, the kind of place with a space heater that rattles and a calendar still stuck on the wrong month. You have never hired an accountant before. You handled your own taxes on a laptop every year since you were 21. This year felt different enough to finally book the appointment. Priya pulls up your account summary and does not react to the total the way you expected someone to. She simply nods as though she has seen bigger and starts explaining brackets you did not realize applied to you. Long-term gains stay at 0% if your taxable income remains under roughly 53,000 filing single, or a bit over 106,000 filing jointly numbers so far, beneath what you now earn that hearing them stings slightly. Above that, you are looking at 15% up to around 583,000, then 20% beyond it. And once your income clears 200,000, there is an additional 3.8% tacked on for something called the net investment income surtax, a phrase that sounds engineered to make you feel penalized for the exact thing you spent a decade building. Priya asks where your bond funds are held. You admit you do not really separate anything. It is all sitting together in one brokerage account. She explains patiently the way Denise once explained scheduling back at the distribution center, that anything generating regular taxable income belongs sheltered inside your retirement account, while assets that grow quietly and qualify for the lower long-term rate belong in your ordinary brokerage. You have been doing it backward this entire time without knowing there was a correct way. She mentions harvesting losses on down days instead of simply absorbing them silently the way you did during that spring years ago, and again 3 weeks ago in that grocery store parking lot, turning your worst mornings into something that actually reduces what you owe. It is a strange thing to learn that the panic you survived had a hidden use the entire time. You leave her office with a list of 5 adjustments to make before year end, and you drive home past the same billboard you always pass, advertising a fully loaded Range Rover starting around $104,000, the exact trim from Marcus's post. You look at it now the way you would look at a menu item you are simply not hungry for tonight. Not out of reach, just not the thing you actually want. At a stoplight, you pull up the listing Priya mentioned at that block party, the coastal units near Sarasota, starting at $2.1 million. You scroll through photos of a kitchen you will probably never cook in. You do not call the number at the bottom of the page. You bookmark it instead inside a folder you create on the spot called maybe later, and naming the folder honestly feels more truthful than either buying the thing or pretending you do not want it. That night, you rearrange everything exactly the way Priya instructed. Bonds moved into the retirement account. Equities left where they were. A calendar reminder set for next December to check for losses worth harvesting. It takes about 15 minutes. Nobody watches you do it. Nobody applauds. You close the laptop and sit for a moment in the quiet kitchen thinking about how much of this year has happened invisibly. The email, the parking lot, the office above the bakery. All of it working on you, the same way compounding works on the account itself, too slow to notice until you look back and measure the distance. A year to the day after the letter, you were sitting in a diner off a frontage road outside town, writing on an actual legal pad because Priya once told you paper decisions are harder to abandon than app decisions. At the top, you have written personal investment rules, and beneath it, in your own handwriting, the exact line that would have stopped you cold in that grocery store parking lot. Never sell on a red day. No exceptions. Wait 72 hours before acting on anything. You are writing it now, so some future version of you standing somewhere just as frightened has something steadier to hold on to than instinct. Your phone buzzes while you write. Marcus again, a new photo, a different vehicle nicer than the Range Rover from a year ago, captioned upgrade time. You look at it for about 2 seconds. A year ago, a photo like that would have sat in your chest for hours. Today, it simply registers and passes the way a billboard does once you have seen it too many times to actually see it anymore. You return to the legal pad. Before you leave, you check the account mostly out of habit at this point, not dread. The portfolio grew just under $170,000 this year, most of it the market simply doing what markets do, when left alone the rest, from contributions you barely felt leaving your paycheck, still maxing the yearly limit without missing the money the way you once missed $40 a decade ago. $170,000, and there was no single dramatic month behind it. No lucky pick, no side hustle that took off, nothing you could point to and call the moment. Only ordinary weeks stacking on top of each other with nobody watching. You think about the first million and how long it genuinely took closer to a decade and a half than anyone tells you at the start, most of it invisible, most of it boring on purpose. Then you run the calculation you have started running without meaning to lately, the same way you used to calculate rent in your head on warehouse breaks. At this pace, the second million does not take 15 years. It takes closer to 6. The snowball no longer needs you to push as hard because it is already rolling on its own. That should feel like relief, and some of it genuinely does. But sitting in the booth, coffee going cold, you notice something else underneath the relief that you do not quite have words for yet. You are no longer someone who needs this money in order to survive. You cross that line somewhere between the parking lot and the office above the bakery without any ceremony, the same way you crossed the first million without one. You spent years being someone trying to get somewhere. You are not yet sure what kind of person you are supposed to become now that you have arguably arrived. You fold the legal pad and slide it into your bag beside your laptop. Outside, the evening traffic on the frontage road does exactly what it always does. Nobody in any of those cars aware that you just wrote a rule that might save you close to $100,000 someday. You walk to your car thinking about Marcus's new photo about Foster's message, still sitting unanswered in your inbox about the coastal listing, still bookmarked in a folder called maybe later that you have not opened since December. The number on the account is no longer the question. You already know it will keep climbing, whether you watch it closely or not. The real question follows you out to the parking lot and climbs into the passenger seat with you quiet and unanswered the entire drive home. Once the money stops being about arriving somewhere, what exactly are you keeping it for? You drive home with that question still sitting beside you, and for the first time you let it stay there instead of rushing to answer it. That is new. A year ago, you needed every number to resolve into a target, a payoff, a finish line. Tonight, you simply drive. You think about the legal pad in your bag, the rule you wrote for a version of yourself who has not panicked yet. You think about the office above the bakery, the bookmarked listing you have not opened Marcus's next vehicle, Foster's message still unread. None of it demands anything from you right now. Tomorrow, the account will do exactly what it does, whether you check it or not. Tomorrow, you will still get up for work, still make coffee, still be exactly this ordinary. The number changed. The Tuesday did not. You pull into your driveway and sit there a moment longer than necessary. Engine off.